At the end of September 2024, Jon Pult, co-president of the Social Party of Switzerland and member of the Swiss Parliament, whom I met in person in August 2024, handed in a parliamentary initiative which requests amnesty for all Swiss citizens who fought for the freedom and independence of Ukraine and thus Europe. This so-called crime against Switzerland's controversial law of neutrality is punishable by up to 3 years of prison. This is ridiculous in many ways. First, in the Federal Constitution of Switzerland, it is written, neutrality is not a constitutional and political principle which belongs in the Federal Constitution, since it is impossible to know if someday neutrality has to be abandoned in order to maintain independence. Unlike many Swiss citizens of our days, the wise Swiss Confederates of 1848, who looked back at over 500 years of wars in Europe, in which their ancestors had to participate as well, knew and understood the responsibility of each nation to be politically and militarily flexible and adaptable in an ever-changing time. This statement in the Federal Constitution of Switzerland has never been changed until this day. So the concept of neutrality is a cheap excuse for Swiss opportunism. Second, the Den Haag Convention of 1907, written and signed before the First World War, at a time when Switzerland was still encircled by imperialistic and colonial powers, gave Switzerland the permission to be neutral by treating aggressor and victim the same way. At that time, an agreement which made absolutely sense and which showed how advanced and wise the old Swiss Confederates were compared to their neighbors. But nowadays, with a big part of the world being democratic and obviously threatened by rising neo-imperialistic powers like Russia, it is again a cheap excuse for Swiss opportunism. Third, according to Article 2, 51 and 103 of the UN Charter, aggressors and victims cannot be treated equally, and the right to self-defense is justified and, if necessary, has to be supported by the other member states. Switzerland is part of the UN and has to respect the UN Charter. In other words, Switzerland fails again to live up to its full responsibility towards Ukraine, Europe, and the whole democratic world. In connection with the explanations above, I demand of Switzerland to show the same wisdom which the old Swiss Confederates had, by showing the skill to flexibly adapt to the new demands of our times today by dissolving the Den Haag Convention of 1907, which already lost its logic and application during the Second World War, and now even more with the threat posed by Russia, and by becoming a true leader in defending and upholding the UN Charter. And this is how I see the steps which need to be taken to do so. First, with the current laws of Switzerland, it is possible to grant amnesty to all Swiss citizens who fought for the freedom and the independence of Ukraine and thus Europe. By doing so, Switzerland would make a strong statement that they condemn Russia's genocidal war in Ukraine and that they are willing to defend freedom and independence in a military way. Second, Switzerland should dissolve the Den Haag Convention of 1907 and make the UN Charter count by defending its principles, like cutting all diplomatic ties with Russia, imposing full economic sanctions on Russia, giving all Russian money stored in Switzerland to Ukraine, and by sending weapons and troops to support Ukraine in the defense of Europe against the Russian invasion. Third, if it is too complicated to change so quickly and suddenly, Switzerland should at least use the amnesty of the Swiss citizens who fought for the freedom and independence of Ukraine and thus Europe to next dissolve Article 94 of the Swiss military law, which punishes Swiss citizens for their service in a foreign army. Most democratic countries worldwide allow their citizens to serve in a foreign army, especially when the democratic world is threatened as it is now by Russia. So why can Switzerland not do the same? But no matter what Switzerland and the democratic world will do to defend Ukraine and its own freedom and independence, I know the following. Russia and its allies want to undermine and destroy the democratic world by sabotage, disinformation, and force to create a new world order under their control, and they will not stop unless defeated. Any deal, any treaty, any agreement which resembles a compromise will play into Russia's and its allies' hands and prove to them that if they try long enough, to destabilize and intimidate the democratic world, they will succeed eventually. Bleeding Russia slowly out is a dangerous strategy because it costs a huge number of lives, allows physical and mental destruction and confusion to spread further and further, and gives time to Russia and its allies to find new solutions and partners to counteract. All pro-Russians or passive members of the democratic world will be the first to change sides or flee with all of their money once Russia and its allies stand with their armies at the respective border instead of fighting the invaders. Does the democratic world really want to give power to such traitors to jeopardize the lives and future of the faithful and true members of democracy and its ideals of freedom and independence? Offense is the best defense. So if the democratic world really wants to defeat Russia and its allies quickly and efficiently, it has to act as one and do it now by sending all the money, weapons and troops to Ukraine which are necessary to defeat Russia and its allies. The so-called danger of a nuclear war has to be considered as ridiculous too. We live in a world with many nuclear powers, so anyone knows if you start a nuclear war, you sign your own death and destruction too. Russia and its allies are not suicidal, just hungry for power and wealth. In this sense, I announced the following plans of mine. I still have some interviews, presentations and books waiting for me in connection with my efforts to support Ukraine and the future of Europe. But if the parliamentary initiative of Jona Neidhart to grant amnesty to all Swiss citizens who fought for the freedom and independence of Ukraine and thus Europe will be rejected by December 2024, and the military justice of Switzerland does not show any efforts to proceed further with my prosecution, by the beginning of next year, I will return to the Ukrainian battlefield to continue my fight there until the war is over or I am dead. It is absolutely tragic to note that many courageous Swiss citizens who fought against dictators like Franco and Hitler in the past and Putin today, and who acted in harmony with the recognized values of the democratic world, are honored for their courage and virtue only after their death, instead of supporting them from the start and throughout their lives. I am also disappointed in the democratic world in general, because in such obvious cases like Ukraine and the future of Europe, most people still do not have the courage to fight for what is right. Where are the courageous, determined and wise politicians, military leaders and citizens of any democratic country to defend the very sense of their own democracy, namely freedom and independence? In conclusion, I urgently invite politicians, military leaders and citizens who consider themselves true members of democracy and its values to truly act on behalf of the future of Ukraine and the democratic world by doing everything in their power to defeat Russia and its allies quickly and efficiently. Laws have to be adapted, rules have to be bent, and obstacles have to be bypassed. Where there is a will, there is a way. Why not declaring martial law now? I, for myself, will gladly add my blood to the tens of thousands of Ukrainian freedom fighters and innocent civilians who gave their lives for the future and the future of Europe, even if the democratic world stays an undecided coward. Glory to Ukraine, defense of Europe!